For those of you that are unaware, roughly a year ago, Marvel Comics relaunched the epic Ultimate Universe with their new comic, Ultimate Invasion, which might be the one comic book that has come out in the last like 3 years or something that has actually managed to capture my attention in some way. This comic book, this one damn book, is so good. I genuinely believe it might be the one thing that will save the fucking hellhole that comic books are on currently. We'll get to that. If you do not know what the Ultimate Universe is, I highly suggest you Google it. TLDR, it's a different alternate universe in the many different alternate universes that the Marvel world has, except this one, you know, there's like revamped version of the characters that got their own series. The entire universe was destroyed in the Secret Wars event, and now Marvel, and specifically writer Jonathan Hickman, has brought it back for another hurrah. Though really it's probably just here so it can tie into a possible Secret Wars 2 comic book that would tie in with the Secret Wars movie, which I think is kinda lame, but whatever. So in essence, Ultimate Invasion is the setup for what this new version of the Ultimate Universe will be like. Ultimate Invasion is like the first comic book in like this long series of books that are gonna come out over the next maybe like 2 or 3 years. But I will be talking about all the ones that have come out so far, which is actually quite a few of them. So, how good or trash are these comic books? I want to start this Ultimate Invasion section by saying I used to be a Wednesday warrior. You know, every week I went to the comic shop and I bought whatever new issues that come out. I love having like physical booklets in my hand of tiny pieces of story. It's just fun. It's also hella expensive. And quite honestly, like, there just came a point where I stopped caring. I find the vast majority of new comic books that come out to just be plain, expensive, boring. I mean, there's some cool indies here and there, but like they're way too far and few between. I could go on, but that's like an entirely separate rant. That's not really the point of this video. My point is that this book right here, Ultimate Invasion, is the first book to come out in a good while that not only did it pique my interest, but I like kept coming back to it month by month because I was dying to know what happened next. The plot is this. The maker, also known as Evil Reed Richards, or the original Ultimate Universe's Reed Richards, he's at it again, and you know, he's doing bad guy stuff, but this time he goes back in time through the entire history of the main Marvel universe and starts changing stuff. He makes a brand new timeline of events where superheroes were never a thing. You know, like the Fantastic Four, they missed the rays that gave them superpowers. The Hulk was able to get into cover in time. The Spider was squashed before it bit Peter Parker. Kinda clever, not gonna lie. This leads to him becoming the new tyrannical dictator of the new Ultimate Universe, which instead of being 1610, it's 6160. Now I do want to start by saying that part of me is getting a little tired of the whole we have to stop a tyrannical dictator plotline that's just been covered in media lately. It's been done to death. At the same time though, I am a sucker for it. If Star Wars has taught me anything, is that there's nothing more satisfying than taking down a dictatorship, especially one that suppressed democracy. And I honestly quite like the fact that we got the maker back for this one. Easily one of my favorite supervillains that has come out of the last like 20 something years of Marvel. From the very beginning of the comic book, he really like cements himself as like a threat to be taken seriously. Like even early on in the comic, he murders like a gazillion people in just like one issue. He can time travel. He has the cunning of Reed Richards, and also like he's basically immortal. He's just such a fun villain. You really want to see him eat shit. But more importantly, he's like the epitome of the insurmountable obstacle. You know, in storytelling, your protagonist always has to beat harder and harder challenges as it goes on. This guy's pretty good at that. A worthwhile antagonist brings the best out of characters. And this especially goes for someone like the maker. I'm telling you, this guy easily steals every scene he's in. I also love how the story develops. Like, this is a rather short comic, only 4 issues, but it's so rereadable. There's so many details, dialogue exchanges, historical exposition. It's very impressive how Hickman in just 4 issues gives you such a strong grasp of the antagonist, the main characters, the world, the main events. Everything feels so grounded, realistic, almost like I can put my hand through the comic and take it out. Some of the writing here gives some of the best books I've read a run for their money, okay? I have read this entire thing twice already, and I still want to go in for a 3rd time just because it's so entertaining and there's so much to sink your teeth into. Let's talk about themes for a moment. Oh, I like those. Recently, I've been reading this beautiful comic book called Dan Slott's run on Spider-Man. Again, probably could be an entirely different video, but some thoughts I have so far is just how simplistic the antagonistic philosophies of some of these characters are, and also how simplistic the philosophies of the superheroes can be. What I'm about to say is going to be something like a little subjective, so take it with a grain of salt. Because, like, you know, superheroes are all about saying, oh yeah, we don't kill people because killing people is bad. And that's fair enough, you know, if you don't want to kill somebody because that's your philosophy, okay, who am I to argue with that? On the other hand, if there's a terrorist on the loose who is actively murdering people for quite literally no reason, and then when you finally have the opportunity to pull the trigger and end all of the suffering, and then you choose not to, I don't know, man, I don't know if I agree with that. Now, I don't want to pull a Zack Snyder here and say that not killing people is a bad mentality. If value A is killing people is bad, which is the protagonist's belief, and value B is killing people is necessary, which is the antagonist's belief, then these two values are obviously at odds and also make up the heart of what the story even is. With these two values in mind, the writer has to properly set up and pay off why value A is better than value B through the story to successfully convince the reader that killing people is indeed bad. If this is poorly executed, then the story loses its foundation and makes for poor storytelling. Bit of an oversimplification, but you get the idea. With this in mind, the more nuanced / intense the values in question are, the better the story. This is why we love redemption arcs so much. It takes an extreme belief and then slowly changes it through the story for an entirely different, new, and better belief. So when you have like the same very simplistic, very straightforward philosophy and challenge it in a very poor way, that makes for dull stories in my opinion. With that said, Ultimate Invasion stands out from the crown of other superhero comic books like pineapple on pizza. This is a world where superheroes and villains are completely arbitrary. Conflicts are manufactured to give the people an enemy to fight for. The Maker is this supremely cynical villain who believes conflict is the only way to unite humanity. And in a certain way, looking at both the Marvel Universe and also our real world, he's not really wrong. Of course, if you really think about it, you can see the flaws in his way of thinking, but that's what makes him a good villain. His motivation is very nuanced, but also fundamentally flawed. An excellent mentality to fight against for the heroes who develop their own even further, which is exactly what goes down in the latter 2 issues. And this comic is a fucking banger, isn't it? I mean, dude, just look at this panel. Is this not the hardest fucking image you have seen in your life? The ending is also fantastic, having Howard Stark trap the Maker in this space-time bending thingamajig that gives the heroes in the Ultimate Universe 2 years to figure things out for when he eventually gets out. This also leads us into the following Ultimate Universe tie-ins, which we'll get into in a moment. But first, I do want to conclude that idea I introduced in the beginning, that this comic book will make waves across the comic book world. Hopefully we get, more complex, more thought-provoking, smaller in scope comic books like this with cool ideas than some of the other stuff we've been getting. I will give Ultimate Invasion a high anticipation for a second Secret Wars out of 5. But now we get into the part where I'm gonna get giddy. I finally get to talk about the one comic book that I fucking love from the last couple months, okay? I am of course talking about Ultimate Spider-Man, baby! As I am recording this, the last issue to come out is issue 4, so yeah, just keep that in mind. I am so excited to talk about my favorite new comic book. Can you see the giddiness on my face? Full transparency, Ultimate Spider-Man, the one from the 2000, is once again one of the first comic books I read when I was getting into comic books. I fucking loved it. It was love at first page flip. It's been a couple of years since I read it, so I don't really know if it holds up, but it's pretty good in my mind. What I can tell you is that this new Ultimate Spider-Man 2024 is an absolute fucking bop. Like, I am genuinely excited, you know, every month when a new Ultimate Spider-Man comic book is about to come out. Every week I'm like on my phone checking Comic Geeks like, holy shit, is the new Ultimate Spider-Man out already? You know earlier how I mentioned that the Maker squished the spider before it bit Peter? Well, this of course meant that he never became Spider-Man and apparently led a rather normal life. Over the last 20 years he's just been like your average guy, really. He married Mary Jane, thank God, had 2 kids, Uncle Ben is still alive. All things considered, things are going pretty well for him. Yeah, except Aunt May. Yeah, she died during the events of Ultimate Invasion, so ripperoni for her. As a massive Spider-Man fan, this is everything I have wanted for the character for the last 16 years. Yeah, 16 years and more. Again, could make a whole video about this, but one of the things I really hate about the comic book industry as it is today is A, how the comics are written, and B, how they're distributed. Especially with individual issues, man. Not only is it $6, but I get a story that is A, something I can read in like less than 10 minutes, and B, 1/6 of a story. It's not even the whole thing. You gotta wait 5 months to get the other 5 parts to then have a complete story. It's just so unsatisfying. I much prefer how it was like 180 years ago or whatever, where I paid like actual 5 cents, which is like $1.50 in today's money, and I got like 80 pages worth of comic that featured either like a complete story or like a bunch of different complete stories. Like, oh my god, what a deal! Ultimate Spider-Man brings me back to the good old days, even if it is still hella expensive. What I like most about it is the fact that this is a very episodic story structure that Hickman is using. Every issue is its own complete story that naturally propels itself into the next, which gives so much more versatility and more of a distinct identity to each individual issue, while also making them extremely rereadable, much like Ultimate Invasion, with this dense yet very thought out dialogue. Like, the latest issue, issue 4, is just a conversation around the dinner table, okay? And it's incredible, cause through just sheer dialogue, Hickman is able to challenge these characters in ways we haven't really seen done since like the fucking 90s. Questioning Peter Parker's decision to keep his secret identity from Mary Jane, questioning his role as Spider-Man, questioning his role in the upcoming war against the Maker. It's great stuff. This is a comic book that challenges not only Spider-Man himself from a foundational level, but also the dog shit they've been feeding us lately. This is what I've wanted from Spider-Man comics since 2008, and I am so glad Hickman is on the writer's wheel. Highly recommend this one. I'm really excited to see where it goes, and very much excited to read it month by month. I will give Ultimate Spider-Man 2024 one happy and satisfying marriage with Mary Jane that will not be destroyed or cease to exist by any devil or any dumbass deal, or so help me, out of 5. Full disclosure, I don't think I've read a single Black Panther comic book in my entire life before this one, so take what I'm about to say with a slight grain of salt. My knowledge of Black Panther goes as far as the movie. Not even the second one, because I never saw that one. Not really a character I'm super passionate about, to be honest. But this comic book, this thing right here, it's pretty good. Again, I know pretty much nothing of Black Panther and its universe, but even I can tell that there's been a lot of fundamental changes to the character in this comic book. Wakanda is under attack by one of the Maker's henchmen, which is this really cool reimagining of Moon Knight. So now Black Panther's gotta stop him. I love how Brian Hill for this comic book keeps a somewhat similar writing approach that both Spider-Man and Invasion are using, but you know, with his own unique twist. Again, we see some great dialogue, some great clash of ideals with how different characters think Wakanda has to be run, especially in the face of, you know, the Maker and stuff out there. We also get introduced to some fun new characters like Storm, who is not part of the X-Men in this universe, and Killmonger, who is now a good guy, which I think is pretty cool. At least he's a good guy here. I don't know if he's a good guy in like the main comic books. So yeah, don't really have much else to say about this one. Think it's good so far. Think I'm really enjoying it. I'm gonna be reading the stuff that's coming out now. I'll give it like, I don't know, 3 Wakandas out of 5. Now this is one that I was really excited for. Peach Momoko is, in my opinion, one of the most notable figures working in the comic book industry right now. She's Japanese and takes a lot of the defining features of manga and anime and brings them to American comics. In essence, her books are just manga with Marvel characters, which I think is pretty dope. She also both writes and draws the comic books, again like in the manga industry, so they feel like more personal than most other comic books. Previously, she worked on this series called Demon Wars, which I have read, and I quite like it. It's pretty good. And if you did read that series and you read this one, you're gonna notice a lot of commonalities between the two. Like, outside of the art style and whatnot, some like concepts, some story beats, they're pretty similar, some adaptations of characters. I should note that as of me recording this, the first 3 issues have come out, so keep that in mind. This is a complete reimagining of the team. Not only in terms of like the characters themselves, but also like the genre, because surprisingly enough, Ultimate X-Men, I would say, is a lot closer to like a horror comic than anything else. There is some disturbing shit here that's so much more similar to something from Junji Ito than from Marvel Comics. It follows this girl called Hisoka. In the first issue, we see as she's haunted by a shadow that's constantly reminding her of her old friend Tsubasa, who committed suicide, unfortunately. Or at least it implies that he killed himself. Maybe there's something else going on. We don't know yet. Like I said, some pretty disturbing stuff is in this comic book. There is a lot to love here, but in all honesty, I think I like it more on a conceptual level than the comic itself, which has been my feeling for a lot of Momoko's work as I've read through them. She incorporates, again, a lot of Junji Ito style of body horror, especially with panels that continually hide the face of the monster before exposing it in one terrifying big panel that showcases all of the gross details of the monster. But I don't think the horror works as well here, and this is mainly because the body horror is just not that scary. With Junji Ito, one of the things that made it so scary is that the normal characters are rather cartoony, or anime-like, what have you. Meanwhile, the monster, or whatever we're supposed to be scared of, is going to be this hyper-realistic monstrosity. It gives you a sense of the other. We as humans identify more with the cartoony characters, so when you contrast that with this hyper-realistic figure, it creates a sense of like you're seeing something that's truly from another world. This makes for some truly terrifying panels. And it's also like at the center of what makes a lot of manga so compelling. I would say I got this information from Understanding Comics, but this interpretation of Scott McCloud's, cartoon, the hyper-realism ratio, specifically I got from the Matt with 4 T's video talking about Junji Ito. Highly recommend it. I'll link it down below if you want to learn more about like these comic book theories. But yeah, in Ultimate X-Men, I just felt like the monsters or ghosts or whatever are just too similar in art styles to the normal characters we're meant to identify with, and just don't create that same sense of the other, which in turn doesn't really create any dread. Which kind of sucks, since that's a big part of what makes this comic book unique and a big part of its identity as well. What I do love here is the slow reveal of this character's backstory in the first issue. It's a more grounded and down-to-earth take on a superhero that we don't normally see from Marvel, and some of the structural changes feel right out of a manga, which I am of course a big fan of. We're still not very deep into this series, but it does have the potential to really shake things up by the time the first arc ends. It's a breath of fresh air, and it really is a joy to have Peach Momoko working on this. Love seeing people like reinvent comic books. I will give Ultimate X-Men 4 monstrosities out of 5. Check this one out, it's good. If by any chance you don't read comic books and are watching this YouTube video, I highly implore you to check out any of the titles that sound interesting to you. Like, again, you can just read Ultimate Invasion and then go from any of the other 3 in whatever order you want and you'll be fine. If you're still looking for places to read them, again, local comic book store, local bookstore. Some of these are already available in Marvel Unlimited. Again, you can just sell the 7 Cs. I don't judge. Regardless of which way you do it, I genuinely think these stories are great, and I want to see like more people read them and talk about them. And I really hope that Marvel gets the memo that people want to read, you know, rather straightforward narratives with a simple beginning, middle, and end that's easy to follow, and not have to read like a bajillion million comics just to understand this one convoluted and storyline that just makes no goddamn sense. Subscribe for more Ultimate Universe, and I'll see you next video.